I think that we are facing a potentially nightmare scenario in our country. And the nightmare scenario is simply this. Take the ecological stuff off the table for a second. Just politically, we are about to be living in a country that is getting more and more ethnically diverse, more and more culturally diverse, more and more socially diverse, but less and less economically prosperous. More ethnically diverse, but less economically prosperous. That is not a recipe for a common ground. That's a recipe for a battleground. And what you're seeing happen in American politics is that there are a set of people who see that scenario and they have an answer. And their answer is push back on the diversity, squeeze back on the diversity, attack immigrants, attack Muslims, attack people who want to marry somebody that looks the same as them, obsess over, and push back on the diversity. That's the way they want to solve this problem. And I say those people are 100% wrong. They are 180 degrees headed in the wrong direction, because our diversity in this country is not a weakness or a problem. It is our biggest source of strength. It is, in fact, a solution to our problems, the diversity. What we do in America every day is a miracle. We have a country that is blessed with the genius and the wisdom of all peoples. We have every color, every nationality, every faith, every gender expression, every sexuality, every sexual expression in one country. The genius and the beauty of all people concentrated in one country. That is a miracle in human history, and we make it work every single day. I go all around the world. I go to countries, they got 2 ethnic groups, and they fight all the time. I'm like, you just got 2! 2! You can't work it out with 2! I mean, in Oakland, my kid, when we're in Oakland, my kid goes to a school, they got 36 languages spoken in his elementary school, and they make it work every day. It's a miracle. And it's out of that diversity and the hybrid interactions there that we will get the next generation of entrepreneurs, of inventors, we'll keep our workforce young. The diversity isn't the problem. In fact, we should want more of it. The answer isn't to push back on the diversity, it's to grow the economy. That is the big challenge that this cohort of fellows has. You will have the same challenge this year and 10 years from now. You've got to be able to put America back to work so you can pull America back together. That is the twin challenge, to put America back to work, to grow the economy, so rather than fighting each other over less and less and less, we can be working together to build more and more and more. Now, as we go forward, we have, literally starting in January, I think a tremendous opportunity. People have been a little bit shy, I think, about championing a real change agenda because people have been concerned about how you coordinate that with all the stuff going on in the subcommittees of the subcommittee and stuff people don't understand, and all these strange words like public option and cap and trade. And I think what I would encourage us to do now is just to be loud and proud about our values again. Like, we spent a whole bunch of time in head space talking about policies, and we didn't spend a lot of time in heart space the past 2 years talking about principles. We now get a chance to go back to talk about principles. And one of the principles we should have, and I think every fellow here can share, is that we are not living in a poor country. This is not Bangladesh. This is not Malawi. This is a rich country. So the idea that we should now take a country traumatized by an austerity program shoved down the people's throat by Wall Street, a private sector austerity program, that we should now put a public sector austerity program on top of that and begin cutting more and more and more help for people, is something we should oppose on moral grounds. We should oppose it on moral grounds. Before we double-stuffed children in the classrooms across America, 40 kids in the classroom with 6 books and no chalk, before we start punishing old people and sick people and little people in this country, we need to look at where is the money that we have. These banksters are sitting on top of literally multiple billions of dollars of taxpayer money. These banksters, every one of them, would be homeless right now, but for the generosity of the American taxpayer. You would go to New York, you would go on Wall Street, and you would see strange people. They would have a tin cup and Gucci shoes, right? Going around begging for money, and your kid would say, "Mommy, who is that guy?" And you would say, "Shh, ex-Wall Street guy, don't stare," right? Ex-big banker, don't stare. Right? The banks would have been out of business. We bailed them out. They're now sitting on top of taxpayer money, but they won't loan people money to start businesses. And now these banksters are about to get the biggest bonuses in human history, and they're about to start another round of foreclosures. The same banks that have our money are going to be taking bonuses and pushing people out of their homes. That's a moral disgrace. And we should not apologize for standing up coast to coast and saying we will not accept this in our country. Halliburton has not been asked to give up a penny, a nickel, or a dime because we are stuck in these ridiculous wars that nobody in red states or blue states can explain to you what we're doing over there. And yet Halliburton is fat, dumb, and happy while we're closing hospitals and health clinics across the country. That's wrong. That's morally wrong. And we should now be completely licensed to step forward and to reassert that there are some things we won't accept in our country. And so I'll say the third place where there's money that we need to focus people's attention on is big oil. They get massive subsidies and supports, while our poor solar entrepreneurs and eco-entrepreneurs have to go year to year with little tax credits that always are going to expire, and you can't even build an industry and put people to work. These are now the moral and economic issues that we get a chance to champion. And those of you who are working in the places where the pain is, who have your hands on the people, you are holding the people. You have a responsibility to speak out in a different way. We can't let our low self-esteem and tendency to sink into despair remove us from the battlefield at the one time when we really need a movement. This is when you're needed. This is when your courage is needed. This is when your commitment is needed. This is when your clarity is most needed. It's now when people are demoralized and they're hurt and they're scared. And they said, I thought I had somebody, a Messiah had come down and was going to be in the White House, and it turns out he's just a person, and now what's going to happen to me? That's when people need a movement. That's when people need a movement. So we can no longer indulge ourselves. We can fine, be upset through Thanksgiving, but come on, right? Between Thanksgiving and Christmas, we gotta stand up. And I want to make one more point, because I think it's important because of the Native American sister who's here. We have to have some humility now. The West, Western civilization, so-called. There were people who were here before we got here who were telling us the whole time that you can't just bulldoze and pave and pillage and drill and burn. That at some point, this adolescent rebellion against our mother was going to have some consequences. And so those of us who go forward and call ourselves environmentalists and clean energy people or whatever, we need to recognize, I feel, that a lot of the smarty pants ideas that we have are simply a return to the wisdom of our great-grandmothers. We're simply going back to the wisdom that our great-grandmothers, not just here in North America, but all around the world, our great-grandmothers had wisdom, and they said when the colonizers first appeared, the conflict wasn't just over labor, it was over land. And your great-great-grandmother told the colonizer, you can't chop down all these trees. You can't dam up this river. This river is holy. These trees are sacred. And the colonizer said, well, these people are pagans, and they worship rocks and stones, and there's something wrong with them, and we know better. What the colonizer did not understand is that our great-great-grandmothers were speaking actually the highest of ecological wisdom. They were speaking poetically. When they said, this grove is sacred, they mean if you chop it down, we're going to have droughts. When they said, this river is holy, they said, if you dam it up, we're going to have pestilence, because they had passed down that wisdom poetically for generations. And so now suddenly, when we have this sort of clean and green and all this sort of stuff that seems so alienating to poor folks and seems so alien from people of color, we have to be willing to say, actually, and by the way, this is the human family coming back to its best self. This is a human family saying, we're no longer going to run the world economy based on death. Oil is a fossil fuel. That means it's dead. Coal is a fossil fuel. That means it's dead. If it's coal, that's 300 million years of death. If it's oil, that's 60 million years of death that we then pull out of the ground and burn in our engines and our power plants without ceremony, and then feign shock when we're pulling death out of the ground, burning death in our engines without ceremony, and then we get death from the skies with climate change and have death on the oceans. No, the indigenous people have been telling us the whole time that this is the direction that we're going. And so now we finally get to come together as a human family with the technological genius of the West, but other ways of knowing to chart a way forward. And as we do that, as we recognize the sovereignty of our native peoples and their wisdom, not just their resources, but their wisdom, we can do the kinds of things as a country that lets us be a world leader and a great power by setting a world-class example. Not unleashing a world-class military on the world, but by showing how a rainbow, multiracial, multicultural, multi-faith people can come together and solve tough problems and show a rainbow, multicultural, multi-faith world how it's done. That's how we get to be a great power in the new century. And so that vision, that opportunity is not only in the hands of the people who work in the White House. The movement was never, yes, he can. That's what we've got to get over. It was never, yes, he can. It was, yes, we can, and we still can. Thank you very much. We still can.